In the year 2147, Earth was no longer a quiet planet tucked away in a forgotten corner of the galaxy. For centuries, humanity had dreamed of meeting intelligent life from beyond the stars. Books were written, movies made, and endless debates held about what such an encounter might look like. But when it finally happened, it wasn't anything like anyone had imagined. Instead of a peaceful greeting or a shared moment of cosmic wonder, humanity found itself staring down the barrel of an ultimatum. It began on a chilly morning in November, when the skies above every major city on Earth darkened unnaturally. At first, people thought it was some kind of freak weather event. Then they saw the massive ships descending silently into orbit. These weren't sleek, silver flying saucers from old science fiction stories. They were jagged, obsidian monoliths that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Each ship stretched for miles, casting ominous shadows over the continents below. News outlets scrambled to cover the event, but there was little information to share. No one knew who or what was aboard those vessels. Within hours, communication channels around the world lit up with activity. The alien fleet had sent a message, broadcast globally, in perfect English. It was short, cold, and devoid of any warmth or curiosity. "We are the Council," the voice said, mechanical yet commanding. "You will provide tribute. Further instructions will follow." Panic spread quickly. Governments convened emergency meetings. Military forces went on high alert, and ordinary citizens huddled in their homes, glued to their screens as analysts tried to make sense of what was happening. Who were these beings? What did they want? And why had they chosen now to reveal themselves? 2 days later, humanity received its answer. A smaller vessel detached itself from the fleet and entered Earth's atmosphere, landing smoothly in a remote desert region. From it emerged representatives of the Council, towering figures clad in shimmering black armor. Their faces were hidden behind featureless masks, giving them an almost robotic appearance. They carried no weapons, at least. None visible, but their presence alone was enough to instill fear. The United Nations hastily assembled a team of delegates to meet with the aliens. Among them was Alex Carter, a seasoned diplomat known for his calm demeanor under pressure. He had spent years negotiating peace treaties and trade agreements, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Standing beside him was Rachel Hayes, a linguist whose expertise lay in deciphering unknown languages. Though she had never worked with extraterrestrial dialects before, her skills made her indispensable to the mission. When the delegation arrived at the designated meeting seat, neutral orbital station, constructed decades earlier for potential first contact scenarios, they were greeted by the Council representatives. The aliens communicated through a small device that translated their speech into human languages. Their words were clipped and emotionless, leaving no room for negotiation. "Your species consumes resources recklessly," one of them stated flatly. "To ensure balance, you will surrender all technological advancements developed within the last century. Failure to comply will result in your eradication." The room fell silent. Alex clenched his fists beneath the table, struggling to keep his composure. Surrendering a century of progress would cripple humanity, plunging society back into chaos. Yet, resisting the Council seemed equally impossible. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth possessed, and their sheer numbers suggested they could obliterate the planet without breaking a sweat. Rachel, meanwhile, listened intently, her mind racing. Something about the way the Council spoke struck her as odd. Their sentences were precise, almost rehearsed, as though each word had been carefully chosen to convey dominance. She noticed subtle pauses between phrases, as if the translation device needed time to process certain concepts. Could there be more to their language than met the ear? If so, understanding it might hold the key to survival. As the meeting dragged on, Alex did his best to stall for time, asking questions and requesting clarifications. The Council responded with growing impatience, warning that further delays would not be tolerated. Outside the station, tension mounted. Protesters gathered in cities worldwide, demanding answers from their leaders. Some called for immediate compliance, believing it was the only way to avoid destruction. Others argued for resistance, citing historical examples of civilizations that had risen against seemingly insurmountable odds. Back inside the station, Rachel scribbled notes furiously, trying to piece together patterns in the council's phrasing. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important hidden beneath the surface, a clue, perhaps, to their true intentions. Little did she know, her observations would soon lead to a discovery that could change everything, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. For now, however, the weight of the situation bore down heavily on everyone involved. Humanity stood at a crossroads, facing a decision that would define its future. Would they bow to the Council's demands, sacrificing their hard-earned progress for the promise of survival? Or would they find another way, even if it meant risking annihilation? The clock was ticking, and time was running out. The orbital station buzzed with tension as the second round of negotiations began. Alex Carter sat at the long metallic table, his fingers drumming lightly against its surface. Across from him, the council representatives stood motionless, their black armor gleaming under the artificial lights. Rachel Hayes sat beside Alex, her eyes fixed on the small device that translated the alien's words into human language. It was a strange contraption, pulsing faintly with an inner glow, and every time the council spoke, it emitted a low hum before spitting out their sentences in clipped tones. "We have provided our terms," one of the aliens said, their voice devoid of emotion. "Compliance will ensure your survival. Defiance will lead to extermination." Alex swallowed hard, trying to keep his expression neutral. He glanced at Rachel, who gave him a slight nod. She had spent the hours since the first meeting analyzing every word the council had spoken, searching for patterns or inconsistencies. Her findings hadn't been conclusive yet, but she had noticed something odd about their phrasing, a repetitive structure that seemed almost ceremonial. It was subtle, but it hinted at more than just a demand for tribute. Still, they couldn't afford to jump to conclusions. Not when the stakes were this high. "Your demands are significant," Alex said carefully, choosing his words with precision. Surrendering a century of technological advancements would disrupt billions of lives. Surely there must be room for negotiation. The council's response came swiftly and without hesitation. "Negotiation is irrelevant. Your compliance is required. Delay will not be tolerated." Rachel leaned forward slightly, her curiosity getting the better of her. "May I ask a question?" she said, her voice calm but firm. The council paused, tilting their heads in unison as if considering whether to acknowledge her. Finally, one of them nodded. "You mentioned balance," Rachel continued. "Could you explain what you mean by that? How does taking our technology restore balance?" The council's reply was immediate, delivered in the same monotone voice. "Your species consumes resources recklessly. Your progress destabilizes the equilibrium of the galaxy. By surrendering your advancements, you contribute to the restoration of order." Rachel frowned, jotting down notes on her tablet. The phrase restoration of order struck her as peculiar. It sounded less like a practical solution and more like a mantra, something repeated often enough to become ingrained. She wondered if it held deeper meaning or if it was simply rhetoric designed to justify their actions. As the meeting dragged on, Alex tried to steer the conversation toward alternatives. "Perhaps there's another way we can assist you," he suggested. "Instead of taking our technology, maybe we could collaborate, share knowledge, work together to achieve mutual benefits." The council's reaction was swift and dismissive. "Collaboration is not an option. Your kind lacks the capacity for such arrangements. Compliance is the only path." Alex sighed, inwardly. Every attempt to find common ground was met with cold rejection. It was clear the council viewed humanity as inferior, unworthy of anything beyond submission. But Rachel wasn't ready to give up. Her mind raced as she listened intently, picking apart the nuances of the council's speech. There was something mechanical about it, as though they were reciting pre-written lines rather than engaging in genuine dialogue. And then there was that ceremonial phrase again, restoration of order. It kept cropping up, almost like a ritualistic incantation. During a brief recess, Alex pulled Rachel aside. "What do you think?" he asked quietly, his brow furrowed with concern. "Is there anything we can use here?" Rachel hesitated, flipping through her notes. "I'm not sure yet," she admitted. "But there's definitely something off about how they talk. It's too formal, too rehearsed. And that phrase, restoration of order, keeps coming up. I think it might be important, maybe even symbolic." Alex nodded thoughtfully. "If we can figure out what it means, we might have a chance to push back. But we need to tread carefully. One wrong move, and they'll pull the trigger." Back in the negotiation room, the council resumed their demands, reiterating the consequences of non-compliance. Outside the station, the mood on Earth was growing, increasingly volatile. News of the ultimatum had spread rapidly, sparking protests and riots in cities worldwide. Some people argued that surrendering was the only way to survive, while others called for resistance, no matter the cost. Social media platforms were flooded with conflicting opinions, hashtags trending across continents. Among the chaos, a grassroots movement began to take shape, led by a man named Daniel Brooks. Daniel was a former military strategist turned activist, known for his fiery speeches and unrelenting determination. He had spent years advocating for global unity, warning that humanity's greatest threat wasn't each other, but the unknown dangers lurking in space. Now, with the council looming overhead, his message resonated more than ever. Through online forums and live broadcasts, he rallied support for a bold plan, refused the council's demands, and prepare for war. "We've faced extinction before," Daniel declared during one of his broadcasts, "and every time, we've risen stronger. This isn't any different. If we bow to these invaders, we lose everything, not just our technology, but our dignity, our freedom. We fight, or we fade away." His words inspired thousands, maybe even millions, to join the cause. Underground networks sprang up, sharing information and resources in preparation for whatever came next. Meanwhile, governments debated their options behind closed doors, torn between appeasement and defiance. Back on the orbital station, Rachel continued her analysis, piecing together fragments of the council's language. She suspected there was more to their demands than met the eye, hidden agenda buried beneath layers of protocol. If she could uncover it, she might find a way to turn the tables. But time was running out. The council grew more impatient with each passing hour, their warnings growing sharper and more menacing. As the meeting drew to a close, Alex made one final plea. "Give us more time," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "This decision affects billions of lives. We need to consider all possibilities." The council's response was chilling. "Time is a luxury you cannot afford. Decide wisely." With that, the representatives turned and exited the room, leaving Alex and Rachel alone with their thoughts. They exchanged a glance, both aware of the enormity of the task ahead. Humanity's fate rested on their shoulders, and they had no idea if they were ready for what was coming. Rachel Hayes stared at the screen, her fingers trembling slightly as she scrolled through the decrypted data. The discovery that parts of the council's language had been borrowed or stolen from other species sent a shiver down her spine. It wasn't just a linguistic curiosity. It was evidence of something far more sinister. The council wasn't an all-powerful governing body born from unity or wisdom. They were parasites, feeding off weaker civilizations by stripping them of their knowledge, resources, and even their words. This realization changed everything. She called Alex Carter into the room immediately. He arrived with a cup of coffee in hand, his face lined with fatigue from days of endless meetings and sleepless nights. When Rachel explained what she had found, his expression shifted from exhaustion to disbelief and then determination. "This changes things," Alex said slowly, setting the coffee aside. "If the Council relies on stolen technology and ideas, they're not invincible. We might actually have a shot, but we need proof," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Right now, this is just a theory. If we can show world leaders and the public that the Council isn't some untouchable force but a predator preying on others, it could unite humanity against them." Alex nodded, his mind racing. "We'll need to dig deeper, find out how they operate, what makes them tick. And we'll need Daniel Brooks' help. His network has access to information we don't." Meanwhile, Daniel Brooks was busy coordinating efforts across continents. Underground labs worked around the clock to analyze the energy signatures detected around the Council's ships. Scientists hypothesized that these fluctuations indicated weak points in their defenses, potential vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Engineers designed experimental weapons based on reverse-engineered alien tech recovered from past UFO sightings and classified military projects. It was risky work, but desperation drove innovation. One evening, as Daniel reviewed progress reports in a dimly lit basement office, his phone buzzed. It was Alex. "We've got something big," Alex said without preamble. Rachel found evidence that the Council steals from other civilizations. Not just resources, but language and technology too. "They're not gods, they're thieves." Daniel leaned back in his chair, letting the words sink in. "That's huge. If we can prove it, we can turn the tide. People need to know they're fighting parasites, not gods." "Exactly," Alex replied. "But we need your team to verify the data. Cross-reference it with anything you've uncovered about the Council's ships or behavior." "I'm on it," Daniel said, already reaching for his laptop. "I'll send the info to my contacts tonight." Back at the United Nations headquarters, tensions continued to rise. World leaders remained divided over whether to comply with the Council's demands or resist. Some argued that surrender was the only way to ensure survival, while others insisted that resistance, though risky, was the only path forward. The debate grew heated, with accusations flying back and forth. Amid the chaos, Alex and Rachel presented their findings to a select group of diplomats. "These aren't benevolent overseers," Rachel explained, projecting the decrypted data onto a large screen. "They're predators. Every civilization they've encountered has been stripped, bare sources plundered, populations wiped out. Their dominance isn't natural. It's built on theft." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. One diplomat, a middle-aged woman named Susan Blake, spoke up. "If this is true, compliance won't save us. Allowing the Council to take our technology would make us complicit in their cycle of destruction. Resistance may be our only option." Her words resonated with many in the room, but skepticism lingered. "Even if we fight," another diplomat countered, "how do we stand a chance? Their fleet dwarfs ours. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." "That's where Daniel's team comes in," Alex interjected. "They're working on experimental weapons targeting weaknesses in the Council's ships. Combined with psychological tactics like exposing the truth about who they really are, we might have a fighting chance." The meeting ended with no clear consensus, but seeds of doubt had been planted. For the first time, some leaders began to see resistance not as reckless bravado, but as a calculated risk worth taking. As the deadline approached, Rachel delved deeper into the ceremonial phrase, "restoration of order." She became convinced it was more than just rhetoric. It was a trigger, a command embedded in their communication protocols. Using advanced decryption software, she isolated the sequence of symbols associated with the phrase and ran simulations to test its effects. What she discovered was startling. When spoken in specific contexts, The phrase seemed to override certain functions within the Council's systems. This could be our ace in the hole. Rachel told Alex excitedly, if we can use this phrase correctly, we might be able to disrupt their operations even temporarily. That could buy us time to strike. Alex listened intently, his brow furrowed. You're talking about using their own language against them. But how do we know it'll work? And how do we deliver it? We'll need someone on the front lines, Rachel said. Someone who can get close enough to the council representatives to say it directly. Alex hesitated, knowing the risks involved. It's dangerous. If they catch on, whoever delivers the message could be killed. It's a risk we'll have to take, Rachel replied firmly. We're running out of options. On the sixth day, Daniel's network delivered promising news. Experimental weapons designed to exploit the energy fluctuations in the Council's shields were ready for testing. While not guaranteed to destroy the ships, they could potentially disable key systems, creating openings for attack. At the same time, protests worldwide reached a fever pitch, with millions rallying behind Daniel's call for resistance. Social media campaigns exposed the Council's true nature, sharing Rachel's findings and fueling outrage. As humanity prepared for what lay ahead, Alex and Rachel finalized their plan. They would confront the Council one last time, armed with both knowledge and courage. Rachel's carefully chosen phrase delivered at the right moment might disrupt their systems long enough for Earth's forces to launch a coordinated assault. It was a desperate gamble, but it was the best chance they had. The seventh day dawned gray and cold, the skies heavy with clouds. Across the globe, people held their breath, waiting to see if humanity would bow to the Council's demands or rise up to defy them. In the orbital station high above Earth, Alex and Rachel stood side by side, ready to face whatever came next. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders and on the power of a single word. The news of the Council's ultimatum spread like wildfire, igniting a storm of fear, anger, and defiance across the globe. In the days following the second negotiation session, humanity seemed to split into two camps. On one side were those who believed surrender was the only way to survive. They argued that giving up technology, no matter how painful, was better than risking total annihilation. We can rebuild, they said, but we can't come back from extinction. On the other side were the resistors, led by Daniel Brooks, who saw compliance as a death sentence in its own right. To them, surrender wasn't just about losing gadgets or machines, it was about losing freedom, dignity, and hope. Daniel's influence grew rapidly. His speeches, streamed live to millions, painted a vivid picture of what resistance could look like. He spoke of humanity's resilience, pointing to moments in history when people had stood together against overwhelming odds. We've faced tyrants before, he declared during one broadcast, and every time, we've found a way to fight back. This is no different. The Council thinks we're weak, but they don't know us. They don't understand what we're capable of. His words resonated deeply, especially among younger generations who had grown up dreaming of space exploration and interstellar adventures. For them, the idea of bowing to an alien overlord felt like a betrayal of everything humanity had worked for. Protests erupted in cities worldwide, with crowds chanting slogans like, "No tribute," and "Stand together." Some demonstrations turned violent as tensions boiled over, but most remained peaceful, driven by a shared sense of purpose. Meanwhile, Alex Carter and Rachel Hayes returned to Earth after the orbital station meeting, their minds heavy with the enormity of the task ahead. They had been given a deadline 7 days to decide whether to comply with the Council's demands or face the consequences. 7 days to save humanity. It wasn't nearly enough time, but they had no choice but to make it work. Back at the United Nations headquarters, Alex briefed world leaders on the situation. The room was filled with tension as representatives from every nation debated the best course of action. Some argued for immediate surrender, citing the overwhelming power of the Council's fleet. Others pushed for resistance, insisting that humanity had a duty to fight for its future. The arguments grew heated, voices rising until it seemed the meeting might dissolve into chaos. Rachel stayed quiet for most of the discussion, her focus elsewhere. She had spent the flight back from the orbital station, analyzing recordings of the council's speech, searching for patterns or hidden meanings. Her earlier suspicions about the ceremonial phrase, restoration of order, had deepened. It appeared repeatedly in their statements, always in the same context, almost as if it were a code or trigger. She couldn't shake the feeling that understanding its significance might be the key to finding a way out of this nightmare. That evening, Rachel met with Alex in a secure conference room. The walls were lined with screens displaying maps, data streams, and images of the council's ships. "I think I'm onto something," she said, pulling up a file on her laptop. "This phrase, restoration of order, it's not just rhetoric. It's part of their protocol. Every time they say it, there's a slight pause in their speech, like the translation device needs extra time to process it." Alex frowned, leaning closer to examine the data. "You think it's more than just a phrase?" "I do," Rachel replied. "It's possible they're using it as a kind of command structure. Maybe it's tied to their decision-making process or even their hierarchy. If we can figure out how it works, we might be able to exploit it." Alex nodded slowly, his mind racing. "If you're right, this could be our chance to push back. But we'd need proof and fast." The clock's ticking, while Alex and Rachel worked tirelessly to decode the council's language. Daniel Brooks mobilized his growing network of supporters. Using encrypted communication channels, he coordinated efforts to gather intelligence on the aliens' technology. His team included hackers, engineers, and scientists willing to risk everything to find weaknesses in the council's defenses. One breakthrough came when a group of amateur astronomers captured high-resolution images of the alien ships orbiting Earth. By analyzing the footage, they identified strange energy signatures emanating from the vessel's fluctuations that suggested vulnerabilities in their shields. Daniel shared the findings with Alex and Rachel, who were stunned by the discovery. "If these readings are accurate," Alex said, "studying the data, we might be able to target those weak points, but we'd need weapons far beyond anything we currently have." "That's where my contacts come in," Daniel replied. "There are underground labs working on experimental tech things the military doesn't even know about yet. Give me a few days, and I'll see what they can do." As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Governments began implementing emergency measures, evacuating major cities, and stockpiling resources in case of an attack. Families huddled together, unsure of what the future held. Some turned to religion, praying for salvation, while others sought comfort in each other, holding on to hope despite the odds. At the same time, rumors began circulating about other civilizations that had encountered the Council. Stories surfaced of planets stripped bare, their populations enslaved or exterminated. These tales fueled both fear and determination, reinforcing the belief that humanity couldn't afford to give in. Alex and Rachel dug deeper into historical records, looking for any mention of similar encounters. What they found was chilling. Every civilization that had resisted the Council had vanished without a trace. Despite the mounting evidence of the Council's ruthlessness, Rachel refused to give up. She spent long hours poring over linguistic data, searching for clues that might explain their behavior. Late one night, as exhaustion set in, she stumbled upon something unexpected. Hidden within the translation device's output was a fragment of coda, sequence of symbols that didn't match any known language. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Rachel's heart raced as she isolated the sequence and ran it through a decryption program. The results were inconclusive, but one thing was clear: the Council's language wasn't entirely original. Parts of it had been borrowed or stolen from other species. This revelation raised a troubling question. Were the Council truly the dominant force they claimed to be, or were they parasites, feeding off the knowledge and resources of weaker civilizations. The implications were staggering. If the Council relied on stolen technology and language, then their power might not be as absolute as it seemed. Humanity still had a fighting chance, but only if they acted quickly and decisively. As Rachel stared at the screen, her mind raced with possibilities. She knew they were running out of time, but she also knew one thing for certain. The Council had underestimated humanity, and that mistake might just be their undoing. The seventh day arrived, and the air in the orbital station was thick with tension. Alex Carter and Rachel Hayes stood outside the negotiation chamber, their hearts pounding as they prepared for what might be humanity's final stand. The Council had summoned them once again, demanding a response to their ultimatum. Compliance or defiance, there would be no middle ground. Alex adjusted his tie nervously, while Rachel clutched a small tablet containing all the evidence they had gathered. They knew the stakes were unimaginably high, but they also knew that surrendering wasn't an option. Inside the chamber, the Council representatives awaited them, their black armor gleaming under the harsh lights. As Alex and Rachel entered, the aliens turned their masked faces toward them, their presence as imposing as ever. The translation device hummed softly, ready to convert their words into human language. One of the Council members stepped forward, its voice cold and mechanical. "You have reached your deadline. Provide your answer." Alex took a deep breath, stepping forward. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "We understand the gravity of your demands," he began, "but we cannot comply. Humanity will not surrender its progress, its freedom, or its future." The room seemed to freeze. For a moment, there was only silence. Then one of the Council members tilted its head, almost as if confused by the response. "Defiance is illogical," it said flatly. "Your survival depends on compliance." Rachel stepped forward now, her eyes locked on the translation device. She spoke calmly but firmly. "You claim to restore order, but your actions tell a different story. You are parasites, feeding off weaker civilizations. You steal their knowledge, their resources, and their lives. We refuse to become another victim." The Council's reaction was immediate and unsettling. Their forms stiffened, and the translation device emitted a low, discordant hum. It was clear that Rachel's words had struck a nerve. One of the aliens raised a hand, signaling for silence. "Your defiance will lead to annihilation," it declared, its tone colder than before. Rachel exchanged a quick glance with Alex. This was the moment they had prepared for. With deliberate slowness, she addressed the Council again. "Before you act, consider this," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. And then she uttered the word they had chosen, the ceremonial phrase they believed could disrupt the Council's systems. Asterisk enough. Asterisk. For a fleeting second, nothing happened. The Council representatives stood motionless, their masks unreadable. Then, something extraordinary occurred. The translation device flickered violently, emitting a series of sharp, erratic sounds. The Council members staggered back, their movements uncoordinated, as if they were struggling against an unseen force. The hum grew louder, filling the room with an almost unbearable noise. "What's happening?" Alex whispered, his eyes wide with shock. "It's working," Rachel replied, gripping the edge of the table for support. "The phrase, it's disrupting their protocols." The Council's composure shattered. One of them raised a gauntlet hand, pointing at Rachel and Alex. "Cease this interference," it demanded, its voice distorted and uneven. But Rachel didn't stop. She repeated the word, louder this time. "Enough." The effect was immediate. The Council representatives froze entirely, their bodies rigid as statues. The translation device sputtered and died, plunging the room into an eerie silence. For several long moments, no one moved. Then, without warning, the Council turned and exited the chamber, their steps hurried and disjointed. Within minutes, their ship detached from the orbital station and ascended back into space, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Back on Earth, the sudden departure of the Council fleet sent shockwaves through the global population. Cities erupted in celebration as news spread that the aliens had retreated. Fireworks lit up the night skies, and crowds gathered in streets and squares, cheering and embracing one another. Social media buzzed with messages of hope and triumph as humanity basked in the glow of an unexpected victory. But Rachel and Alex weren't celebrating just yet. They returned to Earth, their minds racing with questions about what had truly happened. Had their gamble worked? Or had they merely delayed the inevitable? In a secure facility, they reviewed footage of the confrontation, analyzing every detail. Rachel replayed the moment when she had spoken the word, studying the Council's reaction frame by frame. There was no doubt that the phrase had triggered something, a vulnerability buried deep within their systems. We disrupted their command structure, Rachel explained to Alex, pointing to subtle changes in the Council's behavior after she had spoken. That phrase must be tied to their hierarchy, maybe even their collective consciousness. By saying enough, we challenged their authority. But why did they leave? Alex asked, pacing the room. If they're as powerful as they claim, why retreat? Rachel hesitated, her expression troubled. I don't think they left because they were defeated. I think they left because they were confused or scared. Whatever we did, it exposed a weakness they didn't want us to see. While the world celebrated, Daniel Brooks remained cautious. He called an emergency meeting with his network of scientists and engineers, urging them to stay vigilant. This isn't over, he warned. The Council doesn't strike me as the type to give up easily. If anything, we've made them angry. His instincts proved correct sooner than anyone expected. Days after the Council's retreat, strange anomalies began appearing near Earth's atmosphere. Unidentified energy signatures fluctuated erratically, defying known physics. Scientists scrambled to analyze the phenomenon, fearing it might be a precursor to retaliation. Meanwhile, classified transmissions intercepted by Daniel's team hinted at covert operations being planned by world governments to preemptively strike the Council. Rachel and Alex joined forces with Daniel, pooling their knowledge and resources to prepare for whatever came next. They knew that humanity's victory was fragile, a temporary reprieve rather than a permanent solution. But they also knew that they had proven something vital, that the Council could be challenged, and that humanity was capable of standing together in the face of overwhelming odds. As they worked tirelessly to uncover more about the Council's true nature, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that their gambit had awakened something far greater than they had anticipated. The Council wasn't just a governing body. It was a hive mind bound by ancient protocols. By uttering the forbidden word, humanity had inadvertently triggered a chain reaction, one that could ripple across the galaxy. For now, Earth was safe. But the clock was still ticking, and the next move would belong to the Council.